Should we get started, one?
Sure, sure. Well, thank you very much, everyone. It's a true pleasure to have you. We have a treat today with Izabel Barros, all the way from Rio de Janeiro. She is going to be introduced by Wilson Martini, our director of events and actually real estate director with Diageo. But wanted just to give you a quick word. As you know, our organization is about um, education, about networking, and in these times of pandemic, it's really important to be connected and to be participating. And just before joining, we were saying that we're all longing to go back to the office, but only God knows what those offices are really going to look like. So this is very timely, and Isabel will give us a presentation, but you're welcome also to participate both via the chat or at the questions and answers at the end. We have a number of the members of the board with us. We have Mario Anicama with Oracle there, our director of education. We have Wilson Martini with events. We have Miles Glasgow, our treasurer, Francisco Cereda, with our director of young leaders. Genevieve should be joining us in a second for women's, and I can start to see a lot of people joining in here. That's wonderful, and we're very thankful. Wilson, why don't you take it over and introduce Isabel and take it from there?
Great. Thank you, Juan. Guys, it's a pleasure to have Isabel here. I was lucky to watch her present this wonderful content on another CoreNet event a couple months ago, and I asked her to if she could repeat and do this again for us today. So I'm very happy to have her here. And for those who don't know her yet, Isabel is a consultant with over 25 years of experience helping global organizations promote innovation, manage complex contents, and design new work experiences. We have a Ph.D. from Illinois Institute of Technology. She's an expert in projects related to innovation, culture, and strategic change management to support workers, and workplace. With multilingual capabilities and global experience, she's especially interested in the challenges associated with multicultural innovation, global, local, and corporate cultures, alternative work, and learning experiences for the challenges of the future. So she's here today to talk about the greatest question of all, what's going to happen to the offices in the future. So that being said, I will give you the world, Isabel. Thank you very much. It's a pleasure to have you here again.
All right. Thank you so much for this fantastic background. That's kind of really cool about it. So let me put this on presentation. I think you're watching my screen, right?
We are, yes.
For some reason, I cannot put it on presentation mode. No. Okay. So let me get started. First of all, thank you very much for taking the time to be here by the end of your days, most of you, and especially Glenn joining in from the UK. It's pretty late there, so thank you so much. The idea of this presentation is that I believe we all have questions of what the future might look like. We're living such a very uncomfortable time of uncertainties, and what will be like when the pandemic is over. When is that going to be? How are we going to live and work after that? We're seeing that a lot of people are feeling that pressure and dealing with those dilemmas about returning or not to the office. How might and there's a great opportunity whenever we go through this kind of thing. There's a great opportunity in terms of thinking how we're going to emerge from this big reset. how can we make it a better place for all of us, especially in the future of the office? So uh, I would like to ask you to have your best friend ready in your hands so we can make this a little bit more interactive. We are going to be using this site, menti.com, and the code, I will show the code again as just you just reach that. I want to talk a little bit about what we do and who we are very quickly. We are part, since 2018, I'm one of the founding members of FRB Consulting, and we specialize in workplace strategy, change management, and experience and culture design. We use a framework that is about understanding the organizational aspirations in terms of the culture and the processes as the work experience catalyzers, but using space and tools as facilitators. And more than ever, we have our tools and space kind of meshing together when we think about the physical and the virtual worlds. So how we can leverage those to help us build this new workplace, both physically and virtually, but as they are connected to the business side of the house. We normally talk a lot about the design language, the human language. We consider culture and behaviors. We talk about principles and attributes of design. And a lot of the times, those things are detached from the business. What are the critical success factors? What's the return on investment? So by bridging those three languages, we believe that it's possible to build a different way of tackling workers and the workplace, ways of understanding and foreseeing a future that will be ever more particular to each organization. I don't think we're going.
Tá sentado aí, não são esses caras que estão aparecendo aí.
Oops. Let's see. So, what's the vision of the future? How did we get here, right? Let's look backwards a little bit and do a countdown. Let's think about everything we've been dealing with, especially in this world of facilities, real estate portfolios. We know since 2011 that individual workstations were not in use at least 50% of the time. We also know that in 2016, the Gallup State of America Workplace stated that 43% of people in the US use some time of remote or flexible working. And I don't know if you've seen lately, you have in the US, Kate Lister just did a Senate hearing a couple months ago, and she published a study that only 3.6% of the US population practice remote working equal or more than 2.5 days a week. And that was for 2018. So we're moving towards 2019, and we have this study of the International Workplace Group that shows that 50% globally of workers globally are using remote and flexible work. So we see a trend here before the pandemic that we are moving towards a more flexibility, more remote work. And then we also were in the bandwagon of collaboration and innovation were the big norms to lead to competitive advantage. We had this trend about critical thinking. Everything was about design thinking, but we were also charging our brains so much with the excess of information that we were starting to see a stress epidemic. And then we got this all agile everything. We needed a new mindset to deal with this ability of thinking and rethinking things over again and doing sprint, scrum, being more adaptable, and finding this new mindset. And then we were also living, especially for this population, for this audience here, we were all traveling a lot. We used to say that it was really dangerous when you started to know the crew of a segment. And people ask, oh, I haven't seen you last week. It's like, what am I doing? I'm living on an airplane. So the travel worker, wherever worker, whenever worker was the norm. We were really, I used to say that my office was my backpack. I could do anything, anywhere, at any time, just by having my backpack with me. And then pandemic came, and we got 100% of the world of the office workers working remotely. We had a client at the time, right before COVID, that they could not think about the possibility of virtual work. They were considering being really aggressive and implementing 1 day a week of home office. And then in 24 hours, they had 94% of the workforce working from home. And this 6% took them a little bit over a week just to set people up in their homes on being able to move it. So, as McKinsey puts it, it's the big reset. It's like as if we pushed the button and everybody went home. And after 7 months of quarantine, the pandemic starts to take an emotional toll. And we saw last week in this World Health Organization article that they over 60% of the world, the people who are being caught within, well, the whole world, the people, we the people, right? We're having over 60% of symptoms of pandemic fatigue. So we're tired. I think Juan Gallardo was saying right at the start of this conversation that I'm dying to go back to the office. I really would like to go, and that's the feeling. We need to find some level of normality as we see work and life becoming increasingly difficult to separate. And how will we do it? How will we return to corporate offices? When, what for, and why? I think those are the questions behind all of our thinking is what's going to happen. So that's the time for our cell phones. If you wouldn't mind, if you would like to simply use the QR code or enter on your browser if you're on your computer, menti.com, and the code is 7769398. And I'll do it myself so I can see how long it takes, especially considering that I'm not an expert. All right. I think you're all ready. Let's hear from you. What did you do in the office before the pandemic that was really good? What you used to do? What did you used to do? Enter some keywords so that we can get started in.
I'm not sure that I got it. I get these couple of questions. I'm not sure if the rest did get it, Isabel.
I'm sorry.
No, I wonder if everybody got in with the
Can you share
Mentimeter.
the code one more time, Isabel, so I can put it in the
Sure.
chat?
Let me. I don't know if I can get
You don't have to go back. Just if you could just tell me the code, I'll type it in the chat.
Yeah, if I knew, I would. Here it is. Okay. Menti.com 7769398. Did you get it?
Yep. Thank you.
So going back there. So we can see that one of the big reasons we went to the office before the pandemic was to collaborate, to meet, to connect, to socialize, coffee meetings, meet the people, to learn, development, connect, collaboration, work, okay, being productive. We'll give you a little bit more time. You can see 30 people, 18. Okay. So it's a lot about the human interaction, and that's what I think we're missing. We've been missing the most lately. And if you think about the future, and if you start thinking about after the pandemic, what would you see yourself doing in the office after the pandemic? It should have changed in your retirement. Okay. Client meetings, team meetings, face-to-face gatherings. Nothing. So good. Okay. And it's interesting that nothing appears here because as we ask that question over and over during this period that we are working from home, we see a lot of people starting to question, why would you even have an office? Why would you have a place connected to your corporate life, collaborating, be in the same room, see other, stay home base? So a lot of people are seeing this pull between going to the office to collaborate and being and continuing to be working from home, welcoming a new team member, pick up mail. Yeah. Is there anything still, do we still have mail? So not returning. A lot of people are starting to think of not returning, that the experience today is showing that we can do it. But we know that change is challenging, right? It's not easy. We're going through so many different things and needing to define what's new. And we see that the best work strategy for each organization, defining it will be very complicated. What's the best ecosystem of corporate spaces for each organization? It's highly complex. We have so many options right now, and the home is just one of them. We have also this whole idea that we need to connect those alternative work strategies to the design of corporate space. So I see some of you work exactly in that portion of the world where we need to connect what corporations want to the workplace design. But it's very difficult today if you don't know what's the purpose of the office. So we will need to reveal the role and the meaning of the office very soon. We need, before we start to think about going back or not, we would need to think about what's the idea of a corporate office, what we need to do, and we need to help people prepare for what's new, because this change is really taking a toll at us, and understanding the right strategies for people, for IT, for real estate, new ways of working, all of that will affect your talent, all of that will affect the way people deal with it and the way you respond to the organizational needs. And you cannot do this without understanding how you do this, and it needs to be looking into the future and still think about it connected to business strategies. A lot of people are just thinking about the return or not to the office right now as a cost issue. But what's the strategy behind it? I can cut costs in many different ways, but how can I intelligently connect my portfolio decision making to the bigger business strategies, to the purpose of the businesses, to the vision and mission of the company long term. So what will be this role in post-pandemic? I'm not even talking about right now because everybody talks about COVID and how we're going to be coming back during COVID time. We talk about quarantine, and this morning I was talking to a client where they said, well, quarantine in my head was about 40 days and it's been 7 months. There's something wrong with the math, right? And we don't know how long it's going to take. So we need to really understand that. And I love this quote from a journalist that said the global pandemic sent trends that were already happening into hyperdrive. It's not that we are living something completely new in terms of the trends, but it's really much more accelerated than it was before. And what have we learned with this months of the big reset? How can we think about the renaissance of work in the post-pandemic with what we learned and what we'll still learn? Just a parenthesis, I think Wilson has people always ask for the links of the information we're sharing, and we have shared that with Wilson. I hope he's being able to share it through the chat with you, but we can always send it later.
Yeah, I'm trying to keep up, but yes, I just shared the link. Thank you, Izabel.
All right. So when we look at this, and one of the first studies that came out from MIT talked about three key pillars of this big reset in terms of technical, the humane, and the cultural. Technically, it's pretty obvious right now, I think, is that the virtual meetings came to stay. We're just having an interaction here that wouldn't be possible. A couple of years ago, it would be so hard for everybody to connect. And remote work works much better than expected in a lot of aspects, and that the right technology for different activities makes a difference. That's kind of obvious, but then we start to get into the humane and the cultural issues, and it's a bit more subtle. So how can we maximize the benefits of face-to-face interactions? If we're doing solo work alone and from remote work places, when should we do face-to-face interactions, and how can we make them better, that experience better? How do we define clear purposes for what we do, both alone and together? Understanding what must be done in person and what can be done virtually. And lately we see that the virtual world also required some protocols. When is it that I ping someone with a message? When is it that I send an email? When is it that I have a formal meeting, or I just get on the old phone and talk to someone on the phone? There are some things that are so simple, but it looks like we are forgetting about it. People are going through this exhaustion of virtual meetings, and in the end, you're so tired, you don't know, end of your day, you don't know why you're so tired, because we need to be a better manage of our time and activities. From a culture perspective, we're seeing the big rise of flexibility as the key issue behind everything. It's really important to people to be able to choose where and when to work and maintain. People are liking that flexibility of doing certain things in the morning, in the afternoon, a little bit earlier one day, a little bit later the other. Being with the family, we're seeing that there's happening a lot more participation of men and women in the division of daily tasks, and especially in the education of their children. We're going across the world through online education, which is not easy. If you have a child that's going through online schooling, it's hard. You need to be there with them unless they're 12 years or older. They still need your help. You need to be there. You need to to be much more present than you would when you would take them to the school in the morning and pick them up in the afternoon. And here is something that I added in terms of the harmony of life and work. The original work from MIT says life and work balance. I believe that balance gives you a sense of living on an ever struggling way to find equilibrium. Harmony is just is. You live in harmony, you're not making any effort. It's really an easier world from a cultural perspective that you have your life and your work blending in a way that's healthy for everyone. And that makes that organizations to be much more empathetic in terms of choice, empowerment, and facilitation. We changed a lot of the work of managers that were, in general, gone through MBAs and prepared to manage by seeing and not by facilitating, managing through control and not by empowerment. So we're going through a major cultural change that will change organizations in terms of being more empathetic. And the corporate office starts to be where people get together. As you all in the beginning, if we go back, that's the whole feeling. We need to have a place to get together. And from a corporate standpoint, that's the place to evolve and nurture the culture and the brand of the organizations. That should be the first and foremost thinking behind a corporate office. Why would you have an icon of your culture and your brand? And being an empathetic organization, you would need to understand that the office becomes one of the options of where to work. And because after all, work is something we do, not a place we go to. And it's funny because when you go from one language to the next, they're the same word. So it's I do work and I go to work. In Portuguese, in English, in French, in Spanish, it's the same thing. You do work and you go to work. But work is what we do, not the place. The place should be something else. And so, how we see this, how can we see how we could define corporate workspaces beyond the pandemic? I think at first we need to understand where we were before the pandemic, right? We used to have this, I'll call it the old normal, and I will refuse to call it the new normal, okay? It's just the future. So the old normal used to be that people were implementing new ways of working. We had the major home as the corporate office, and we were gradually practicing one way or another remote work. We would work in co-working places, and your home office, in restaurants, cafes, when we traveled, at hotels. And there was this trend of the use of the corporate office as an icon of organizational culture, but with this whole idea that work happens in the office. Okay. Then we got to the pandemic, and all the different choices, all the different nodes we had to do work were just turned off. We could only do it from home. And I need to highlight here that we're talking only about corporate office work. Of course, factories, first aid, emergency services, these are totally independent, but we're talking about administrative work, corporate office work. So we all went home, and we quickly had to accommodate the workforce in home office, and we need to adjust technology. In the beginning, it was a nightmare. A lot of people didn't even have enough connectivity to be able to be on a call, and much less being on a virtual interaction as we are. And there's this whole trend of learning to manage people remotely. We needed to do very fast, and a lot of people are still in that mode. From this point on, I see an evolution of the ecosystem. But if we look around, a lot of businesses are in this pandemic work ecosystem today. Then I see an evolution of that we call the first wave, where slowly the office work, because you have it, it's there, it's sitting there empty. You need to bring people back somehow, and that's the obvious choice. How we are going to be using our office within all the requirements of security and safety right now, with social distancing, the use of masks. In many countries, they are obligatory, in others not. But you need to have all the sanitization and the cleaning that has different standards right now. So there's this first wave that you need to reaffirm that the company respects its employees. It's open to support those in need. There are a lot of people that cannot work from home due to their family structure, due to their housing structure. And people are trying to establish some work-life balance right now. So we are still struggling at a lot of ecosystems are still into this struggle of work-life balance, and we need to be ready to make adjustments as necessary. How many cities are going in and out of lockdown? They open offices, they close office. And this first wave is really about restoring some sort of routine. At the same time, we see some areas going into a second wave where not only the office came back to work, but people are starting to see that some co-working spaces may be interesting. There are some clients looking into some satellite office locations. So we may have this place that was not active right now, but we could uh, very quickly prepare it as a midway office. It's not so far, people are not in traffic, there's no need for too much public transportation. So it's the stage to prototype uh, solutions, both from a technology perspective and from a space perspective. It's the time to reassess work routine and processes. What really needs to be done? Do we really need to have all the steps or not? What are the training needs that people have? And starting to create some policies and task evaluation systems. So if we see companies right now like Google, Microsoft, Facebook, a lot of them, depending on the country, are starting to look into this set of issues to begin in the second wave. And then we get into the third wave. That's when we will start to reignite all the system around us. And maybe we'll find other ways of using space and place in different manners that we will surely. And that's now when we're talking really about business models, new ways of ownership. So we need to think about new models of space ownership. And there are some people starting to click on this. It's not just about the co-working spaces, home office, restaurant, people starting traveling again, satellite offices, hubs, multiple offices, and using a lot of the opportunities people have in urban and suburban areas to define that right ecosystem, especially for global organizations, which I think we are seeing a lot of you here that are responsible for those global portfolios. We see a need not only to recognize that there's an ecosystem that's very diverse, at the same time, the need to regionalize those ecosystems to the places where you have so it's really about resignifying the corporate office, understanding the purpose, and giving people flexibility, choice, and control. of where and how to work. So when we wrote this paper at first, it was in the very beginning of the pandemic. And we saw this almost as a continuum from where we were, the pandemic's first, second, third wave. What we're seeing as a reality right now is that those three waves are happening at the same time. And about that, we're going to share three different situations we are currently living with clients, okay? And they are in different stages, and what do they have in common? So last year, by end of 2019, October, November 2019, we finished Microsoft in Sao Paulo, the whole change management portion of it. And it was really amazing. We did what we call the strategic change management. We did this in association with Advanced Workplace Associates. It was great experience with the team. We had JLL, we had CBRE, we have Turner and Townsend. It was a fantastic group. The A&D was great. And we were able to imagine the future really beyond the moment we were living in 2019 with no clue a pandemic was coming over. We delivered the project by the end of December. It was really fast forwarding the understanding of the office with all that idea that we need to be future forwarding and future thinking. We did implementation of physical and digital workplace that were really aligned. We aligned new ways of working with the company strategy. There was an integration of portfolio, three different locations into one place, major upgrade and modernization, and really focusing on consistency between global and local culture. Interesting enough, in February, we were doing the measurement of results, and a week after, pandemic hit. So the brand new office, right there, everybody loving it, understanding, beginning to develop new ways of working, highly flexible, an interesting culture. And then the office was not the place anymore as it was being used, but it continues to work well for the new social distancing. There was no change, no major change in the environment necessary for them to continue now to receive people back. Then we had another client that was Aon in Sao Paulo, where by January we did the whole strategic thinking, case for change, and they started construction. COVID hit. They were in the old location, and everybody was sent home. They were implementing a new policy for work from home before the pandemic. People were getting started to update technology, etc. And then 24 hours later, everybody was home. The old building was empty. There was construction going on. 2-3 months later, construction was done. They had 2 buildings empty. So we had to continue doing the change management portion of it because everybody left without taking anything with them. It was like those movies with Day After, when they would take photographs of the old space. It was like, let your pen drop and leave. Nothing was ready to be left behind. So we did a major effort with them through change management activities to empty the building. They could give back the building to the landlord, and now they have this beautiful new space ready for everybody to come in. And good news is that they did this really about understanding how they would develop an environment that would mirror what they understood to be an ideal workspace, independent of anything. And the architects also were great in looking into the future, and now they can do whatever they want with that new office because it will house as many people as they want. It's just a question of adjusting work practices. Third case, that's another point in this scenarios is that we're doing Grupo Fleury in São Paulo. I don't know if everybody's familiar with this, but it's one of the largest labs in Brazil. They do all the blood testing and DNA and chromosome, all the highly complex testing. And they're very, very traditional organization. They are currently in 5 different locations, project to consolidate, new building, great site in the city, started to landmark of the building started in March, no, in February. And project build is going on, 3rd, 4th stage and up. And it was interesting because in the very beginning, we had a little bit of a questioning, why would we need to do all that strategy for our space? And then it was interesting to see the CEO of the group working with us and realizing that because it's not only about the space, they did a major strategy about the future. It's helping them not only to do with the pandemics right now. I don't know if Clovis is online. He was great in sharing his story when we last presented it. But this is really interesting that the building is going up, the project is forward looking because it's also beyond a pandemic, beyond an event. And we didn't change. The architects are now doing fit studies and everything. And the main line of the business, the baseline is respected, and it's really about they flipped the proportion. We normally talk about 80-20 rule, 80% of dedicated individual spaces, 20% of collaboration. From the onset, we flipped it. It's only 20% of the space for individual workstations and 80% for collaboration. That is perfect for a new routine that's going to be established into more collaboration and individual work done elsewhere. So what have we learned, right? How to think the office beyond the pandemic? We think first of all, there's no one size fits all. Each company needs to look for its own model. And this whole idea of a cookie cutter model that worked for company B that we just translate into another building for company C, it's not going to work anymore. A new matrix of use and occupation. We need really to understand what the city ecosystem allows me to think about a property model. What is my portfolio like? What are the cards that I can choose to play better this game? We need really to plan resilient investment. So does it make sense to be in the real estate business, or does it make sense to be the landlord or do a turnkey? It doesn't matter. There are so many possibilities to think out there. Most of all, think about the workplace as the home of the brand and the culture. I think that was something we learned, that looking beyond that idea and a place to build community, to collaborate and socialize is really about evolving the organizational culture to what's next. And definitely think long term to act in the short term, not backwards. It's we need to drive ahead and not be looking too much into the rear mirror. Otherwise, we're going to crash in the car ahead of us. Defining the strategy, the what and why, before defining the tactics, the how. We know how to do things. We have so many specialists, but the what and the why is really critical. Engaging leadership and employees as the protagonists of change. We see ourselves as facilitators of this project, but the change is really the organizational change, the leadership change, employees change. And being willing to learn along the way. So It's okay to change course if we learn something new, if something new happens. And most of all, I think that that's the old um, news that space is an investment, it's not a cost. If we think about it, investment and return on that investment, we can have much more value to it and think about the future in a different way. I think that's what I would like to contribute. What's the role of the new office? Maybe we need to talk about this together.
That's great. Thank you, Isabel. Uh, Before I open to questions to everyone else, just wanted to point out again on the chat, I have all the links that Isabel kindly shared with us for a lot of nice materials. So please check that. And if you have any questions, please unmute yourself or feel free to ask on the chat.
Hey, Wilson, it's Mario and Isabel. I did have kind of a question, and I appreciate all the information, Isabel. And I think you're on the right track. But as you know, there's a lot of uncertainty. We're not sure what the client behavior is going to be like. We're not sure what the employee behavior is going to be coming back from the pandemic. And a lot of these changes do prompt costs or expenditure. And the challenge we have as, I think, real estate professionals, we've always looked at our spaces as an investment, but when you get to the C-suite or your upper management, it's always looked at as a cost. And so how can you tell the story or sell this new idea or concepts that we're trying to invoke once we find the right solution to the answer of what the employee and the clients require?
I believe that the first thing we do is a really good dialogue with leadership to understand what are their business goals, because then you can attach the solution and to their goals. It's not really about, I don't think the new whatever, not today, not before, not in the future, is really about raising the expenditures. I'm not even going to use the word cost because I think there's a bias to it. But not always it's about more expending more. If you look into some of the calculations done by many of the consultants about when you do a nice balance between your real estate. So if you own it, it's one situation. If you rent it is another. But how much you can save from a sustainability perspective in terms of carbon footprint, how much people can save from their own time in terms of commuting. Commuting in big cities is a nightmare, especially if they don't have good public transportation. Security, safety and security of people well-being. You have the actual cost of running a facility. And if I'm not mistaken, and I have the right numbers, if you get your operational costs and people cost 80%, close to 80% of all your expenditures, space close to 10%, technology close to 10%. So why would you use 20% of your operational costs to re-affect badly 80% that's your people? So if you're making our people more productive and working better and wanting to work for you, that's another thing. If you think about engagement, it's another big issue on all organizations. You can raise engagement by having the right balance between the different sorts of workplace you offer. So there are many ways to sell the idea, but it really needs to be focused on your goals and your objectives. Did I answer a little bit your question?
Yeah, and I think, I mean, I agree with you wholeheartedly that the idea of the tail wagging the dog, you know, where only 10% of the expenditure is impacting the 80%. I agree wholeheartedly. Problem is, again, you do have a P&L that you have to look at, in our corporation is very cost focused. I work for Oracle, and that's been the challenge in trying to introduce these new ideas. And trying to promote this flexibility and adaptability to our offices, not only because of the pandemic, we're also seeing because of the generational, the millennials coming on into the workforce in a heavy manner. I saw a stat where in 2025, 75% of the workforce will be millennials. And that was a kind of a staggering statistic that these folks are this generation that really is looking for agility, flexibility, adaptability in their workplace and having this choice. A lot of our spaces today aren't providing that, and not just because the pandemic kind of prevented us from implementing, but the thought was it was working as it was designed currently. Why are we going to change? Was our philosophy at the corporate level, but the pandemic has accelerated, as you mentioned. There's definitely now a new look to it, but predominantly our executives are really not in a rush to go back to the office. They're really trying to have the personnel or employees stay at home. And until this is all cleared out, whether it's a vaccine being distributed and people being inoculated and not having any risk of losing life, they're going to keep going and having remote work as kind of our model.
Yeah, but you said some fascinating things. Let me see if I can kind of touch a couple points there. First of all, I think that's not only about the millennials we're talking about. We have Generation Z already in the workplace. They are younger, they think differently, and they are much more hierarchy clueless than if you think millennials are hierarchy clueless, wait the Z guys. I have them at home, I know. So just beware. The other thing you said that's interesting is about P&L. I would say that there are some very interesting exercises we can make with portfolio to make changes at almost P&L neutral. And that's when we think about hybrid work, okay, independent of the pandemic. So that's a very nice exercise. And the other thing that you said, I think it's quite interesting that a lot of people are starting to consider now is that the pandemic is not going to be about this quarantined 40 days. It's really about, we're looking, I truly believe, I wish I wasn't, I don't know if I'm being pessimistic or optimistic, but I think that 2021 is going to continue pretty much as we are living now the end of 2020. There's a lot of knows, we know a lot of new things about the disease. Even if a vaccine comes out, if there's anybody here that knows more than I do, please. I think there will be a lot more, but if there's someone that's really from the medical area that I think that vaccine is, we're going to, if we're lucky to see something starting in January, the effects of it will be started to be seen by June, July. And so if you're looking for a risk neutral environment, I don't know when we're going to get there. So we have a whole year to try different things. And I think piloting is a great idea.
Great.
Great. I guess we have time for a couple more questions. Anyone?
That was really fascinating, Isabel. Thank you very, very much. I was particularly attracted by this idea of the 80-20. So you're saying it's going to be the other way around, 80% for collaboration and 20% for dedicated space. Can you elaborate a little bit further on that?
Yeah, this is the solution for this one specific client. That's how they foresaw the future for them in terms of how they wanted to, what's their purpose as a business, how they want to execute their vision, and how we're defining that. So it was one of the biggest flips from a workplace strategy perspective, that most of the space would be dedicated for shared spaces, collaboration, connectivity. and very few spaces dedicated for soul-focused work. So thinking about it in practice is that when we normally get into a workplace today, even the most modern ones, there's a sea of workstations, benches, everything for individual work, and some collaborative spaces. Some are more aggressive, they have 40%, even 50, but these guys have decided to go really to the other end of the spectrum and flip the old model of 80 for individual work, thinking about cubicles, benches, open plan, and 20% of meeting rooms and things like that. They did it backwards. And it's a challenge, I think, even for
They're up to something. And I was wondering if I can throw in Rafael Guzman with MasterCard. I'm not sure if I'm going to get him by surprise, but he's a very big user of space. Rafael, would you please unmute yourselves and give us your thoughts on what your organization is doing? Or maybe not. Well,
He might be in a noisy place.
yeah, he might.
Well, I can mention, Juan, that at Oracle, we're looking at that, of kind of flipping the dial on how much dedicated space we have as compared to our flex and just doing a 180. We're envisioning, again, we're not sure, but we're seeing that employee behavior and along with it, management behavior, because it used to be managers weren't so sure to let their folks work remotely because they weren't able to control or determine if the productivity was going to be maintained. I guess the silver lining in this pandemic is that they've seen that it can work and that the folks are being productive and getting the results they're expecting. So we envision kind of at Oracle, we envision that having kind of a hybrid model where we're going to have an ecosystem of the office being a hub, but having kind of open seating for those who do want to come or need to come in for a client meeting or whatnot, but also having that availability to work from home or a third location, whether it be a Starbucks or a McDonald's, because one of the points that we've heard about is the technological aspect, the network connectivity. In some countries and in some areas, you're not able to get that robust connectivity at your home, and you have to go closer to the city to be able to get that connectivity. So we think that there might be some opportunities for folks to also work in other locations where they're able to find that technical connectivity. So we definitely are looking in that direction.
Before we go, guys, I wanted to have Izabel, the last couple minutes here. I wanted to throw the $1 million question to you. I guess I might not be part of the only organization here that is in the moment that is wondering what should we do. I suppose there's a lot of companies right now that have a lot of projects on hold. Everyone is obviously preparing to the return to work and working on their strategies, but I guess the point is you got to start doing something. And as you mentioned, you got to start planning for the long term, but acting short term. What is your recommendation in terms of what should companies start? What should we start doing now in terms of baby steps? You know, what are the small little things that we as corporate real estate professionals should start doing today to prepare for the changes ahead, you know, given all the uncertainty still ahead of us?
I think that baby steps is really a good thing. Don't try to do the big strides. Right now, we may fall. The earth may not be there when you land. So baby steps is good. And I would really get started with some sort of strategy is a funny word, but future thinking about the organization. It's almost when you ask a kid, what do you want to be when you grow up? It's asking the organization, what you want to be, what kind of business do we want to be in when this pandemic ends, whenever it is, no matter when. The when is not a year, but the moment in which we get over it. Then kind of make the exercise of going backwards. Okay, until we get there, what can we do different? I would say that prototyping is key. Prototype small things. I think Mari said that they are looking into some different things, some different ways of different locations, using existing simple things like, let's go to a Starbucks, to a McDonald's or something. How do you deal with confidentiality and privacy in those open environments? What needs to be done in a controlled environment or not? How would you use your existing portfolio? Where do you have places? A lot of people are starting to move from big cities with this whole idea. I don't know in the US. The US has a little bit different dynamic. A lot of small cities already have good structures and big companies in them. But we see, for example, in Sao Paulo today, a lot of the people with kids in school age, they're moving away from the Sao Paulo center to the smaller cities around where cost of living is better, life quality is better. Kids are going to online school anyway. They're not getting into any classroom, at least on an everyday basis. And maybe the school system in the smaller cities is better. And people are starting to move their whole families, their whole lifestyle into new places. So maybe those considerations, what's really changing us as society at this point. A lot of people are considering that they used to have 2 hours of traffic to go to work and come back. Why would I do that? I gain 4 hours of my day just for being at home. Should I look for something closer to home, or should I have more flexibility from my employer? I think all of those things are going to be on the table right now, and they will impact all of us who work one way or another with real estate. Because if you go back to your real estate, what are you going to be doing with it? If you're not, what are you going to be doing with it? So a lot of work ahead, but I think that baby steps is the key. Try it out. Be ready to do well on some things and error on the others and learn from it. Only way that we can deal with it.
That's great. That's awesome. Well, Izabel, thank you a million times again for a great presentation today. In respects to everyone's agenda in different time zones, we're going to wrap up here. Again, this session was recorded. We're going to make it available on our channels. Just look for it on our LinkedIn and CoreNet South Florida page. Again, it was a pleasure to have you all here today. Thank you very much.
Thank you all for your time. Bye-bye.
Izabel.
Bye-bye. Thank you.
Congrats. Thank you.
Bye-bye.